Oh, hey guys, what's going on? It's that time already, huh? Time to do our weekly John Bible study? Okay. Oh, let's go. Yeah! I'm ready. Are you? What's up, guys? Welcome to the Bible Study at Home, where we do video series about passages in the Bible, things about them, the author, what they're about, hidden things inside about Jesus. This is about John 6, verse 25 to 27. Our first conversation about this text is the author. So, who wrote the Gospel of John? Most people would say, of course, because of the name, John himself. But that's up for discussion. It doesn't clearly say in the book, some of Paul's letters will say I, Paul, very clearly, so it's hard to deny. But in the book of John, there's no clear I, John the Apostle, wrote this. So it's up for debate. A lot of people think different things. There was a source that I read studying for this that said that there were 23 alternative explanations to who wrote the Gospel of John. Now that means some are better, some are worse. But 23, that's a lot. That's a lot more than just the easy one answer. So we're going to dive into it a little bit. Now, hint, I believe that John the Apostle wrote it, but it's worth studying. So the first thing that is an argument for John the Apostle being the author is called the deductive argument by B.F. Westcott. Now this guy's very smart. It's a very good argument, and it's the strongest that we'll look at. So the first part, we can kind of by steps figure out that John wrote it by eliminating certain things. So the first one, we know that the author of the Gospel of John was Jewish. The author is very well versed in Jewish feasts, festivals, the calendar, things like that. So all of the things that a Jew would know, he knew very well. And it would be remarkable if he wasn't a Jew. So it's very clear that the author was Jewish. Now, more specifically, he was a Palestinian Jew because of all of the geography. The author knew about the well, the pool of Bethsaida, the pool of Siloam, to name a couple, Jacob's well, and a few others. So he knows very specific points in the region that these Palestinian Jews lived. So it's very clear that the author was a part of this Palestinian group. Now also, we know that the author was an eyewitness to things that Jesus did. He was in on conversations, he was in on insider things that only an eyewitness would know. He saw things, was able to record things. Very clear that the author was there witnessing things that Jesus did. Now, within the eyewitness group, it keeps getting smaller. Jew, Palestinian Jew, eyewitness. Now we can tell that the author, is one of the 12 disciples because of his heavy involvement with Jesus. The conversations that he's a part of are very intimate and very close, ones that Jesus would have with his disciples and his disciples only. And now within that 12 we can know that it is John the Apostle because he is the only one out of the 12 to not have his name listed in the whole group. Now, what makes us think that that's John the Apostle, and what makes us think that he's the author there? Well, every other one is named by name, but when John was a pastor, a couple of years after Jesus died, his congregation called him the beloved disciple, and that is the name that he calls himself in the Gospel of John. So, because of all these things, we can kind of narrow it down piece by piece to point to John the Apostle as the author of the Gospel of John. Our next thing to talk about is the audience and the purpose of the book of John. Now, as we talked about before, every book in the Bible has a specific audience, and each book has a purpose that we need to look at. So for the book of John, we need to look at who John was writing to, and that specifically is his church in Ephesus, back in the ancient Near East. So after Jesus died, John was a pastor of a church in Ephesus. Ephesus was a really big city, so there were a lot of people in this church, but there was something going on in the city and these people that John needed to write about. Now, this was around 90 AD, so it's about 30 or so years after the other three Gospels were written. People wonder, why did John write his so late? Well, John's church people, the people in the city, the Jewish Christians, Jews who had converted to Christianity, they were being persecuted pretty heavily for their beliefs. So they were being threatened because they believed in Jesus. The Jewish leaders said, we're going to kick you out of the synagogue, which is the center of everything Judaism, the center of education for their kids, the center of economy, the center of religion. So basically it's just the hub of their lives, that if they weren't a part of the synagogue, where would they go? Where would they send their kids to school? So they were threatened with being kicked out of the synagogue for trusting and putting their faith in Jesus. And John wrote this book to those people to say that you are doing the right thing by following Jesus, that this Jesus that we've been talking about is the real deal, and what you're doing is good. That's what we have to have in mind, so that these stories and these things have that purpose in mind. So with that said, let's dig into the text a little bit. Now, like I previously mentioned, with Israel having all these tons of festivals that John knew about, one thing in this text in John 6 that we're going to look at is how that relates to the passage, or to the festival of Passover. Passover is one of the major festivals and celebrations in Judaism, where they remember God's deliverance when they were enslaved in Egypt. So this passage relates to the Passover and how God provided manna, the bread from heaven, that they ate every day in the desert. So that's what we're going to look at. And just kind of a little nuance, when Jesus says that He is the bread of life, that's the Old Testament parallel we need to be looking at here. And that it relates to the Passover, and that's where this text is coming from. So let's have that in mind. And with that said, I'd love to read the text. So let's get out our Bibles at home and flip to excuse me, John 6:25 to 27. And the text reads, "When they found him on the other side of the lake, they asked him, 'Rabbi, when did you get here?' Jesus answered, 'I tell you the truth. You are looking for me, not because you saw miraculous signs, but because you ate the loaves and had your fill. Do not work for food that spoils, but for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. On Him, God the Father has placed His seal of approval." And that is our text for today. So, I love this text. It's a great text. There's a lot in here, but our focus is going to be on a couple of those key words of Jesus. First one, Jesus says, "Do not work for food that spoils." Now that's big. That we see that everywhere in today's culture, but specifically in the text, right before our section, like the first verse in our section says, "When they found him on the other side of the lake." So previously, just before this, Jesus was teaching on the other side of the body of water in his town, and across the river, the lake, is where he had fed the 5,000. So these people who had followed Jesus across the lake had just been fed a lot of food, and they were full, and you think that they'd be satisfied. So they just witnessed this incredible miracle of Jesus, and they follow him to see what else this guy's got. So they find him, and Jesus knows exactly what they're there for. They follow Jesus because of the great thing that he did for them, which was feed them. So they had a full stomach, and they wanted more food. They were hungry. They shouldn't be hungry after all they ate, but they still were craving more of this earthly food. And Jesus sees right through this, and he says to them, "Don't work for food that spoils." And then later says, but work for food that endures to eternal life. And so that's our focus of this text, is that there is so much of this perishable earthly food in our world, and that could come in many things. That could come in just body image, how you want to make yourself look. It could be in sports, find fulfillment in your sports, in relationships with others, your significant other, or your friends, and just other things that take your eyes off Jesus, and that is the food that you're searching for instead of Christ. And these people are falling right into that. They came to Jesus because they have a full stomach, and they want more to fill that stomach, rather than coming to Jesus with a full spirit and wanting to be filled that way through His presence and through His grace. So working for that food that spoils, that's a part of our big focus, and I want you guys to think about is there food that you guys are searching for that is not heavenly, that's earthly, that will perish? Because we need to be looking for and working for and searching for that food that Jesus provides, the bread of life that is eternal. This text has a lot to teach us about things in our day, with what we take in and what we search for as our food, but this also has a lot to teach us about Jesus Himself, who He is, what He's here to do, and our relationship with Him. So, through this text, we realize Jesus' divinity in this text, and we also see His authority. In Jesus' divinity, in our text, the last section reads, "Do not work for food that spoils, but for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man, Jesus, will give you. On him, Jesus, God the Father has placed his seal of approval. Now, this is a big deal because it says here in the text that Jesus is the only one who can give us this food that we so crave, that is the eternal food. That's what we search for when we engage in certain things. You know, we desire relationships, but that's the food, that's the hole that Jesus would fill. He's the only one that can do that, and that is the divinity aspect there. Jesus is not just some good guy. A good guy wouldn't be able to fill that. You know, so Jesus is God, he is divine, and we can learn that through this text. And we also see Jesus' authority to give out this food, which is our salvation. So what do we do with this? We know through the text that Jesus is the one who gives us the real food, but let's take that into our lives today. Now I have to ask you guys, and I think you should be wondering this at this point too, what food am I searching for, or am I working for, that won't last? Are there things in my life that I'm striving for, that I'm pursuing, that will fade away in a couple of years, or that won't even last until tomorrow? Whereas I should be searching and working for Jesus instead, which will last a lifetime and an eternity. Something that I ran into in high school, actually, that goes along with this topic. In my athletics, that was something that I used as something to search for that didn't last. I was most involved in cross country in high school. My junior year, everything just took off. Like, I don't know what it was, but I just started to go really fast, and I ended up breaking the top 50 all time at my high school. So I was pretty good. I walked around with some swagger, and you know, I felt like I was the man. You know, I was kicking butt. But really, at this point, I was trying to do these things and achieve these medals and accolades just for me. And I thought that I was setting myself up for a really good senior year because that's what I was going to do, and I was going to do it for me. And then senior year came around, and it was a huge disappointment. I never reached the levels that I did the year before, nagging injuries and things like that. It was just a bad season. I was a little bit depressed about it, and I was bummed. I let it get to me. Now I look back in those moments and I think, wow, like, I was doing all that for myself. Maybe that's why I was let down. I don't know if I would have done better in those races if I would have done that, but my attitude afterwards definitely would have been much better. I would have been less down on myself. I would have been a better teammate, a better captain, a better team leader if I had that attitude for Christ and not myself. So that definitely faded away, and that was a significant part of my life that kind of wasted away. And I believe that was because I didn't really invest in the right type of fulfillment, or I didn't eat the right kind of food, to follow our text here. What are things in your life that you're searching for that aren't going to last? And I want to challenge you guys too, because this is something that I see in the church today. Now, this may be a little bit convicting, it may be tough, you may be hurt by this, but I see a big problem in youth groups as a whole in the church. I think that students come to youth group with full stomachs, like the people did in Jesus' day that were coming to listen to him speak. They came with full stomachs, and students come, look to have fun, don't really care about the spiritual guidance, the godly relationships, and the learning about Jesus. They just want to eat the pizza, play the games, and go home. I want to challenge you guys and youth groups everywhere to really search for that spiritual food that matters when you come through these doors and when you meet with your leaders outside of the gathering here. Search for what really matters. Seek Jesus in everything, because he's the eternal food that will last. And focus on what really matters, and try to keep your eyes focused on eternal things and not things that are just going to fade away tomorrow. So I hope this is helpful for you. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me or any of the other leaders. We'd love to help you. Thanks for watching. Tune in next time.